By the mid-1930s, the vast pine that had once seemed endless in Ashley County was largely gone. For 3 decades, Axeman had pushed deeper into the woods, felling giants with cross-cut saws and dragging them out with mule and ox teams. In 1933, the last Great Woods Village, Crosset Camp, closed, and families moved into town. For men who had lived by the bell of the cookhouse and the whistle of the shay, it felt like a door closing on a whole way of life. What followed in Crosset was not the familiar Southern story of cut out and get out. Instead, company leaders chose to stay and reimagine their forests. As early as the late 1920s, they could see that second growth was rising on cut-over lands. The question was no longer how fast to harvest, but how to keep harvesting forever. In 1927, the company hired professionally trained foresters to bring science into the woods, marking trees for selective cutting, organizing fire protection, and treating timber as a renewable crop. A few years later, the Crosset Experimental Forest was established just south of town, a living laboratory where new methods, seed tree cuts, thinnings, and prescribed burning were tested and demonstrated. Old loggers walked the ridges with young foresters, learning that a forest could be both worked and renewed. Even as the philosophy shifted, technology transformed the work itself. After World War II, gasoline chainsaws muscled into the woods. Early two-man models were clumsy and heavy, but the lighter one-man saws of the 1950s made the misery whip obsolete. What had taken 2 seasoned partners an hour could now be done by one sawyer in minutes. The old cadence of push and pull gave way to a single engine's high whine, and with it, the intimate teamwork of a crosscut crew began to fade. Hauling changed just as dramatically. Rail logging had ruled the early years, temporary tap lines creeping into each 40-acre tract, shays hissing on rough grades, Barnhart loaders clanking logs onto flat cars. By the late 1940s and 1950s, trucks and crawler tractors replaced rails and mules. Rubber-tired skidders with winches gathered bigger turns over rough ground. Later, grapple skidders kept operators in the cab, away from the tangle of chokers. The wood sounded different now. No steam whistles, fewer harness bells, just diesel, gears, and compressed air. By the 1970s, the Feller-Buncher completed the mechanical revolution. In one motion, an operator could grip a tree, cut it, and lay it neatly in a bunch for skidding. Production soared, crews shrunk, and the logger skill set shifted from sheer endurance to machine control, maintenance, and planning. Accidents did not disappear, but the risks changed, from falling timber and rolling logs to rollovers and high-pressure hydraulics. The campfire stories changed too. The talk was less about fighting swamp mud with a mule team and more about keeping a harvester running through a 12-hour shift. For veterans of the crosscut era, the change was bittersweet. Mechanization meant fewer backs broken, fewer hands mangled by saw teeth, and the chance to go home to a family every night instead of a bunk car or a tent. But it also meant an end to the old fraternity, the paired rhythm of a two-man saw, the steady talk of teamsters, and the rough bonds of boarding cars and cookhouses. The woods became quieter in one way and louder in another. The human chorus gave way to engines. Even so, the legacy of the Axemen endures. The county's forests are no longer virgin, but they are forests, planned, planted, and harvested in cycles, stitched together by fire breaks and research plots, watched over by foresters whose practices were proven on the ridges south of town. The catastrophic wildfires that once ran through Slash gave way to controlled burning and fire control. Where charred stumps once stretched to the horizon, rows of second growth now stand, evidence that a timber town can reinvent itself without abandoning the land that built it. Memory keeps the first era alive. A restored shotgun camp house, photographs of men shoulder to shoulder behind a felled pine wider than a wagon, and the handed-down stories of cooks and brakemen and mule skinners. These are the county's inheritance. Families still tell how a grandfather could read a tree, how a grandmother kept a camp kitchen running for 100 men, and how a crosscut song carried across the woods at dawn. In the end, the passage from crosscut to chainsaw marks more than a change in tools. It marks Ashley County's shift from extraction to stewardship, from the swagger of a frontier to the discipline of a working forest. The men who felled the last of the old growth did not imagine themselves as conservationists. They were earning wages in hard times. Yet their labor, their losses, and the lessons learned from the slashes and burns laid the groundwork for a sustainable future. The mills and machines evolved, but the core remained a community tied to the woods, proud of the work that shaped it, and determined to keep the forest standing, even as it's used.